Everyone around you is speaking a language you don't realize you don't speak. You know that one coworker who sends a 3-line email and somehow makes you feel like you just got fired? And then there's the other one, the one who takes 4 paragraphs, 2 GIFs, and a "hope you're having a great week" just to ask if the report is done. Here's the thing, neither of them is wrong. They're not being difficult, dramatic, cold, or annoying on purpose. They're running on a completely different operating system than you are. And once you can see that system, you stop taking it personally. You start predicting it. You start using it. For the next 50 minutes, I'm going to walk you through a framework that behavioral psychologists have used for almost a century to explain why people act the way they do, under pressure, in meetings, in relationships, in arguments. It boils every human being down to 4 core color-coded styles. Once you learn to spot them in about 10 seconds flat, you will never sit through an awkward meeting, a family dinner, or a bad first date the same way again. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly which one you are, which one drives you the most crazy, and, more importantly, exactly what to say to get any of them on your side. Before we meet the 4 types, you need to understand why this framework works at all, because otherwise it just sounds like a horoscope with better marketing. Back in 1928, a Harvard-trained psychologist named William Marston published a theory about human behavior that had nothing to do with therapy couches or childhood trauma. He wasn't interested in why someone became who they are. He was interested in something much more practical. How does a person behave right now, under normal conditions and under pressure? Marston noticed that human behavior consistently breaks along 2 axes. The first axis is pace. Are you naturally fast-moving and assertive, or slower-paced and easygoing? The second axis is focus. Are you naturally more oriented toward tasks and logic, or more oriented toward people and relationships? Put those 2 axes on a graph, cross them like a plus sign, and you get 4 quadrants: fast-paced and task-focused, fast-paced and people-focused, slow-paced and people-focused, slow-paced and task-focused. Decades later, business consultants slapped colors on those 4 quadrants, because fast-paced and task-focused is a mouthful, but red you can say in a meeting without sounding like you're reading a psychology textbook. Here's why this matters more than your average internet personality quiz. This isn't asking, are you an introvert or extrovert? And it's definitely not asking you 50 questions about your feelings toward change. It's observing what's actually visible, how you talk, how fast you talk, what you talk about first, how you make decisions, and what stresses you out. That means you can spot someone's style in the first 30 seconds of meeting them, without them ever taking a quiz. And here's the part that makes it genuinely useful, instead of just interesting. Nobody is 100% one color. You are a blend, usually with 1 dominant color and 1 strong secondary color. But almost everyone leans hard enough in one direction that once you know what to look for, it jumps out at you like a name tag they're wearing without knowing it. So let's meet them. The red. The one who wants the answer, not the story. Let's start with the color that makes the most noise in a room, even when they're not saying much. Red. Reds are fast-paced and task-focused. That combination produces someone who is direct, decisive, competitive, and allergic to wasted time. If you've ever worked with someone who interrupts you mid-sentence to say, "So what's the bottom line?" you were working with a red. If you've ever sent someone a long, thoughtful message and gotten back a single word, yes, no, fine, congratulations, you just met a red. Reds walk into a room and immediately start scanning for the fastest path to the result. They don't do small talk particularly well, not because they're rude, but because small talk feels like friction between them and the goal. Ask a red how their weekend was and you'll get good. Not because they had a bad weekend, but because a 3-sentence answer feels like an inefficient use of both your time and theirs. Here's a story that captures a red perfectly. Picture a project kickoff meeting, 12 people in the room. The manager spends the first 10 minutes doing introductions and setting a friendly tone. Around minute 4, one person in the back has already opened the project brief, skimmed to the deadline, and typed a message to their teammate that just says, "This is due in 3 weeks. We're behind before we start." That's a red. They weren't being cold. They were being useful. From their own point of view, the fastest form of respect they can show a room is getting to the point. What drives a Reds are motivated by results, control, and winning. They want to be the one who made the decision, closed the deal, or hit the number. Autonomy matters enormously to them. A Red who feels micromanaged will either quietly disengage or openly push back. And it usually happens fast, because patience was never their strong suit to begin with. What stresses a Red out? Slow decision-making, meetings that could have been an email, people who need to sleep on it when the Red already decided 4 minutes ago, being told no without a clear reason attached. Reds don't mind hearing no, they mind hearing an unexplained no because it feels like an obstacle with no visible way around it. How a Red behaves under pressure. This is where it gets important, because most people only ever see a Red in one of two states, calm and confident, or stressed and sharp. Under pressure, a Red's directness turns into bluntness, and their decisiveness turns into impatience. They may come across as dismissive of others' opinions, not because they've stopped caring, but because their brain is triaging. Solve the problem first, smooth feelings later, if there's time. How to spot a Red in 10 seconds. Fast talker, fast walker, gets to the point immediately, sometimes before you've finished your sentence. Firm handshake, direct eye contact, minimal small talk. Their office or desk is usually functional rather than decorated. Trophies and results on the wall, not photos and knickknacks. In a text message, you'll notice short sentences, few emojis, and a tendency to answer the question asked and nothing more. How to actually work with a Red. The part everyone skips. The single biggest mistake people make with a Red is leading with context. If you walk into a conversation with a Red and start with background, history, and how you got to your conclusion, you will lose them within the first 30 seconds. Instead, lead with the headline, give them the bottom line first, and only offer the supporting detail if they ask for it. Reds respect people who can hold their ground, so if you disagree with a Red, disagree directly. Hedging and over-apologizing reads to a Red as weakness or evasiveness, which paradoxically makes them trust you less, not more. If you're managing a Red, give them ownership of outcomes, not just tasks. A Red who is told, here's the goal, figure out how, will outperform a Red who is told, here are the 17 steps, follow them exactly, almost every single time. The yellow. The one who makes the room louder. Now, let's talk about the color that walks into a party and somehow already knows 3 people by the time they've taken their coat off. Yellow. Yellows share the Red's fast pace, but instead of being task-focused, they're people-focused. That combination produces someone enthusiastic, expressive, spontaneous, and often the most memorable person in any group setting. If Reds want the bottom line, Yellows want the story, theirs and yours. They talk in tangents, laugh loudly, and have an almost magnetic ability to make a stranger feel like an old friend within 5 minutes. Picture that same 12-person project kickoff meeting from before. While the Red in the back is already reading the deadline, the Yellow at the front of the room is the one who made everyone laugh during introductions, who already has a nickname for the project, and who is genuinely, visibly excited about an initiative that hasn't even started yet. Ask a Yellow how their weekend was, and you will get a full narrative, complete with a tangent about a restaurant they tried, a friend's engagement, and somehow, eventually, an answer to your original question. What drives a Yellow? Recognition, social connection, and enthusiasm. Yellows want to be liked, and, this is the part people underestimate, they want to inspire. A Yellow doesn't just want a good idea, they want to sell you on how good it is, out loud, with hand gestures. Praise lands harder with a Yellow than with almost any other type. Tell a Yellow their idea was brilliant in front of the team, and you've just made their entire month. What stresses a Yellow out? Isolation, rigid structure, and being ignored. A Yellow forced to work alone in a quiet room on a repetitive task for 8 hours straight will start climbing the walls by hour 3. Being excluded from a conversation or a decision hits a Yellow harder than it hits other types, because their sense of value is tied closely to social inclusion. How a Yellow behaves under pressure. This is the twist most people miss. Under pressure, a Yellow's natural optimism can flip into disorganization or over-promising. They agree to things quickly, out loud, in the moment, because agreeing feels good and disagreeing feels like letting the room down, and then struggle to follow through on all of it later. It's not dishonesty. It's a mismatch between how good yes feels to say and how hard yes is to deliver on. How to spot a yellow in 10 seconds. Big gestures, big laugh, fast speech that jumps between topics. Colorful clothing or an expressive style more often than not. Their workspace, if they have one, tends to be personalized. Photos, plants, souvenirs, something that tells a story. In a group photo, they're the one who suggested taking the photo in the first place. In a text conversation, expect exclamation points, emojis, voice notes instead of typed messages, and responses that answer your question somewhere in the middle of 3 other things. How to actually work with a yellow. Never send a yellow a wall of dry, bullet-pointed text and expect enthusiasm back. Lead with energy, not data. If you need a yellow to commit to something, get the agreement in writing afterward, not because they're lying to you, but because the in-the-moment yes is genuine and the follow-through needs a structural nudge. Public praise works wonders with a yellow. Public criticism is close to devastating, so give critical feedback privately and frame it in terms of the bigger vision they're excited about, not just the mistake itself. If you're managing a yellow, build in social touch points. A yellow isolated at a solo desk with 0 interaction will disengage far faster than a red or a blue in the same setup, purely because connection is oxygen for them. The green. The one holding the room together. Here's a color that almost never gets mentioned in the meeting recap, and that's exactly the point. Greens are slow-paced and people-focused. They share the yellow's warmth, but none of the volume. Where a yellow lights up a room, a green quietly keeps it from falling apart. They are patient, dependable, loyal, and, more than any other type, genuinely uncomfortable with conflict. If you've ever worked with someone who agrees to take on extra work rather than say no, who smooths over an argument before it even fully starts, or who remembers your coffee order without being told twice, you were working with a green. Back to that 12-person kickoff meeting one more time. While the red is reading the deadline and the yellow is cracking jokes, the green in the corner is the one who notices that the newest team member hasn't said a word yet and quietly asks them a question to bring them into the conversation. Ask a green how their weekend was, and you'll get a calm, genuine answer, and then they'll ask about yours, and actually wait for the full answer instead of already thinking about their next sentence. What drives a green? Stability, harmony, and being genuinely helpful. Greens don't need the spotlight. They need to know their environment is calm and that the people around them are okay. A green who senses tension in a team, even tension that has nothing to do with them, will feel it physically, almost like static in the room. What stresses a green out? Sudden change, conflict, and pressure to decide quickly. Where a red thrives on a fast decision, a green needs time to process, not because they're indecisive, but because they're quietly weighing how a decision will affect everyone involved, not just the task. Being rushed into a snap decision is one of the fastest ways to overwhelm a green. How a green behaves under pressure. Here's the pattern that trips people up. A stressed green often doesn't look stressed. They go quiet. They agree, even when they don't fully agree, because disagreement feels like conflict and conflict feels unbearable. This is the type most likely to say, "I'm fine," when they are very much not fine. And the people around them often don't find out until the green is already burnt out, because greens rarely raise the alarm on their own. How to spot a green in 10 seconds. Calm, steady tone of voice. Slower to speak up in group settings, but often the person others quietly go to one-on-one. Comfortable, understated clothing and workspace. Nothing flashy, everything functional, and a little bit cozy. In text messages, expect warm but brief replies, thoughtful questions back, and a tendency to check in on you rather than lead with their own update. How to actually work with a green. Give them time. If you need a real answer from a green, not just the polite agreement they give under pressure, ask the question, then explicitly tell them they don't need to answer right now. That single sentence changes everything, because it removes the pressure that makes them default to, "Sure, that's fine." Never spring sudden changes on a green in front of a group. If a change is coming, give them a private heads up first, so they have time to adjust before they're asked to react publicly. If you're managing a green, check in on workload proactively, because a green will rarely tell you they're overloaded. They'll just quietly keep absorbing more until something breaks. Ask directly. Ask more than once. The blue, the one who already found the error in your spreadsheet. And finally, the color that will absolutely, without being asked, notice the typo in your slide deck. Blues are slow-paced and task-focused. They share the red's love of logic and results, but they process at a completely different speed because accuracy matters to them more than velocity. Blues are analytical, detail-oriented, and quietly skeptical of anything that hasn't been checked at least twice. If you've ever pitched an idea to someone who responded with a list of questions instead of excitement, you weren't dealing with a critic. You were dealing with a blue doing due diligence. One more trip to that 12-person kickoff meeting. While the red reads the deadline, the yellow cracks jokes, and the green checks on the new hire, the blue has already opened a separate document and started listing every assumption in the project brief that hasn't been verified. Ask a blue how their weekend was, and you might get a precise, factual rundown, what they did, in order, with reasonable detail, and not much emotional color, because emotional color wasn't really the point of the question as far as they're concerned. What drives a blue accuracy, competence, and being right? Blues take real pride in getting things correct, not roughly correct. A blue who submits work they know has a flaw in it, even a small one nobody else would notice, will feel genuinely uncomfortable about it. What stresses a blue out? Ambiguity, being rushed, and having to make a decision with incomplete information. Where a red will happily decide with 70% of the information and adjust later, a blue often wants 95% before committing. And being forced to skip that step feels, to them, less like efficiency and more like recklessness. How a blue behaves under pressure. Under stress, a blue's caution can tip into overanalysis or outright withdrawal. They may go quiet in a meeting, not because they have nothing to say, but because they don't yet have a fully formed, defensible answer. And offering an unfinished thought feels worse to them than offering nothing at all. This is often misread by faster-paced colleagues as disengagement, when it's actually the opposite, intense, private engagement that just hasn't been voiced yet. How to spot a blue in 10 seconds. Measured tone, careful word choice, minimal small talk, but unlike a red's impatient minimal small talk, a blue's is more like conservation of words than urgency. Organized workspace, precise language, a tendency to answer a question with a clarifying question first. In text messages, expect well-structured replies, correct grammar even in casual chats, and sometimes a slightly longer gap before they respond, because they're thinking it through rather than typing the first thing that comes to mind. How to actually work with a blue. Come prepared. If you walk into a conversation with a blue without data, without a clear rationale, and expect them to just trust you, you will lose credibility fast. And blues do not hand credibility back out easily once it's gone. Give them time to think before asking for a verbal answer on the spot. A blue who is put on the spot in a meeting will often give a hedged, incomplete answer, not because that's their real opinion, but because they haven't finished processing yet. If you're managing a blue, resist the urge to interpret their quietness as disagreement or disengagement. Ask directly, "What am I missing?" A blue asked that specific question will often hand you the most valuable, most overlooked insight in the entire room. Nobody is just one color here. Here's where this framework gets interesting. Instead of just being a fun personality quiz, almost nobody is a pure color. Most people are a dominant color with a strong secondary color, and the combination changes the flavor significantly. A red-yellow is a fast-moving, high-energy type. A personality who wants results and wants everyone to enjoy the ride there. Think of the kind of person who can close a deal and throw the celebration party the same night. A blue-green is a careful, quiet type who wants accuracy and wants harmony. The person who will fact-check something, not to win an argument, but because they genuinely don't want a mistake to hurt anyone downstream. Your secondary color often shows up specifically under stress, and this is the detail almost everyone misses. A green under mild pressure stays calm and steady, But push a green far enough, and if their secondary color is red, you might see a sudden, uncharacteristic burst of directness. The quiet person who finally snaps and says exactly what they think, which shocks everyone because they never do that. Understanding someone's secondary color is often what separates "I sort of get this person" from "I can actually predict what they'll do next." It's also worth saying clearly, no color is better than another. Every single one of these four styles is a strength in the right context and a liability in the wrong one. A red's decisiveness is a superpower in a crisis and a liability in a conversation that needed patience. A green's harmony-seeking is a superpower on a team that's falling apart and a liability in a negotiation that needed someone to hold firm. There is no winning color. There's only the right color for the moment. And the skill isn't becoming a different color. It's recognizing which one the moment calls for and which one is standing in front of you. Why two different colors almost always misunderstand each other? Let's put this into practice because knowing the four colors is only half the value. The real value is knowing what happens when two different colors collide. Because most conflict you've ever experienced with a coworker, a friend, or a partner wasn't actually about the topic you were arguing about. It was a translation error. Red meets green. A red wants a fast decision. A green needs time and hates being rushed. The red pushes for an immediate answer. The green feels steamrolled and shuts down rather than pushing back, which the red then reads as agreement when it was actually retreat. Neither one did anything wrong. They were just speaking two different dialects of the same language, at two completely different speeds. Yellow meets blue. A yellow gets excited about a big idea and wants to talk it through out loud, energetically, right now. A blue wants to see the data before getting excited about anything. The yellow reads the blue's caution as negativity. Why don't you believe in this? The blue reads the yellow's enthusiasm as recklessness. Why is nobody checking the numbers? Both of them are actually on the same side. They just process excitement and evidence in the opposite order. Red meets blue. This one looks like it should be smooth since both are task-focused, but the pace mismatch causes friction. The red wants to move now and adjust later. The blue wants to verify now and move once it's confirmed. To the red, the blue looks like they're stalling. To the blue, the red looks reckless. Get these two in a room with a shared goal and a mutual respect for each other's pace, though, and you get one of the most effective combinations there is. Speed and accuracy. Checking each other in real time. Yellow meets green. Both are people-focused. So on paper, this should be the easiest pairing, and mostly it is until the pace gap shows up. The yellow wants a fast, enthusiastic yes. The green wants to quietly think it through and doesn't want to disappoint anyone by saying no. So, the green says yes before they're ready, resentment quietly builds, and the yellow has no idea anything's wrong until it suddenly is. Notice the pattern across every single one of these. It is almost never about what is being communicated. It's about pace and focus mismatching, with nobody in the conversation realizing that's what's actually happening. Once you can name it, oh, this is a pace mismatch, not a values mismatch, an enormous amount of conflict simply deflates, because you stop needing the other person to be wrong in order for the friction to make sense. How to actually use this starting today. So here's how you take this from interesting video to tool you actually use. Step 1. Identify your own lead color, honestly. Not the color you wish you were, the one you actually are under normal pressure, at your desk, on a Tuesday. Most people can nail this down by asking themselves one question. When I'm stressed, do I get louder and faster, or quieter and slower? Louder and faster points you toward red or yellow. Quieter and slower points you toward green or blue. Then ask the second question. When I'm stressed, am I more focused on the task or on the people involved? That narrows it down to one of the four. Step 2. Identify the color of the 3 or 4 people you interact with most. Your manager, your partner, your closest coworker. You don't need a formal assessment. Just watch how fast they talk and whether their first instinct in a group setting is toward the task or toward the people in the room. Step 3. Before your next hard conversation, adjust your delivery, not your message. If you're a green about to ask your red manager for something, don't build up to it with context. Lead with the bottom line, the way we covered earlier. If you're a blue about to pitch an idea to a yellow client, open with energy and the big picture before you open with the spreadsheet. The content of what you're saying doesn't have to change at all. just the order and the pacing. That's genuinely the whole system. It's not about becoming someone else, and it's definitely not about putting people in permanent boxes. It's about giving yourself one extra second, in the moment, to ask, what does this specific person actually need from me right now, before you open your mouth? That one extra second is where almost all of the friction in your daily life quietly disappears. So, red, yellow, green, or blue. Drop your lead color in the comments, and while you're there, drop the color of the person in your life who drives you the most crazy. I guarantee the comment section on this video turns into a group therapy session, and honestly, that's the best part. If this reframed even one relationship in your head while you were watching, do me a favor and subscribe. I'm breaking down more frameworks like this one every week, the kind that actually change how you read a room, instead of just being fun to think about for 5 minutes. See you in the next one.